Beckley, West Virginia, Tuesday, November 4th, 1947. On a secluded lover's lane near the Black Knight Country Club, 39-year-old Nellie Rae Rand and 50-year-old Ray Bailey are enjoying a romantic tryst. Both are well-known local socialites of means, and both are married, but not to each other. This night they are once again tempting fate, and this time they would lose. Sometime after 8 p.m., 3 shots shatter the calm evening air. 3 shots that would soon plunge the region into a whirlwind of mystery and scandal that has now spanned over 74 years.
Drugs, greed, jealousy. In America, there is an approximately 70 to 80% chance that any violent crime will have one or more of these ingredients as a motivating factor. And the formula was no less applicable in 1947. To wit, the murders of Ray Bailey and Nellie Rand could easily be described as 1 part jealousy and 1 part greed. Their affair was not a well-kept secret, and both were known to be comfortably well off. The brutality of their murders and the scandalous nature of their relationship sent shockwaves through Beckley and the coalfields. Given the age of this case and the understandably slim chance of a genuine resolution, this feature is being presented not so much as an active, unsolved double homicide, which it technically is, but as more of a retrospective on one of the most fascinating and confounding events of West Virginia's not-so-recent past.
The years following the end of the Second World War were years of prosperity and growth for Beckley and the surrounding region. Founded in 1838 and situated along the northern rim of the West Virginia coal fields, Beckley is often referred to as the gateway to southern West Virginia. With a population of just over 17,000, Beckley sits astride the crossroads of Interstate 64 and 77, as well as Highways 19, 3, and 16. Its strategic location makes it a natural point of convergence for the industrial and recreational entities of the region. Beckley is southern West Virginia's largest population hub and a major shopping, entertainment, and lodging center for thousands of the Mountain State's residents and visitors. If you're a tourist taking in the natural or historical beauty of Appalachia, then Beckley will not disappoint. From the exhibition coal mine to the Tamarack Arts Center, Beckley seemingly has something for everyone. Nellie Rae Rand was born Nellie Rae Combs on July 3, 1908, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. In 1929, she married Dr. Kenneth Rand, a practicing dentist in Welch, West Virginia. In 1932, the couple moved to Beckley and later took up residence along Harper Road. Dr. Rand set up his dental practice in the new Lilly Building above the C.G. Murphy's Five and Dime. By 1947, he and Nellie had 2 daughters, Kyra, age 13, and Carolyn, age 11. Both Dr. Rand and Nellie were well-known fixtures of Beckley's society. Dr. Rand's dental practice was successful, and both he and Nellie were deeply involved in local organizations, including the Lions Club, the Elks Club, and the Beckley Women's Club. Elmer Ray Bailey was a lifelong resident of Beckley and veteran of the First World War. Following his discharge in 1919, he went to work for the Beckley Hardware and Supply Company. In 1922, he married Irene Martin, and they too had 2 daughters, Daisy Dean, age 19, and Diane, age 16, in 1947. By 1947, Bailey had been promoted to manager and buyer for the furniture department of the Beckley Hardware Company. On the surface, all seemed well. Both couples set down their respective roots and prospered. Just what prompted Nellie Rand and Ray Bailey to go off the rails is not known with certainty, but by 1947, the volume of local gossip was on the rise. Nellie Rand was known to be vivacious and friendly, perhaps a little too friendly in the minds of some other wives. In mid-1947, Kenneth Rand confronted Nellie with the allegations of infidelity and raised the possibility of divorce. Nellie is reported to have repented and promised to end the affair then and forever. However, by November, while the weather was cooling, the affair was apparently heating up once again. It would finally come to a head and an end on November 4th, 1947. By all accounts, November 4th, 1947 started like any other day for all of the dramatis personae. Dr. Rand went to work as usual at his private dental practice in downtown Beckley, and Ray Bailey reported to work as usual at the Beckley Hardware and Supply Company, located at 100 Haber Street. Around midday, Nellie Rand had her hair shampooed and waved at a beauty parlor in Beckley. Here, she was overheard to say that she was going to buy a present for Irma Lowe, whose wedding shower she was to attend later that evening. After leaving the beauty parlor, Nellie did proceed to a local gift shop, where she purchased 2 pieces of chinaware, the same pattern as that requested by Irma Lowe. She had the 2 pieces of china wrapped separately. At around 4 p.m., Nellie visited her husband at his dental office, where she confirmed that she was going to use the family car to drive to the shower that evening. Dr. Rand recalled that he last spoke to his wife at approximately 5:30 p.m. when he called her at home. He advised Nellie that he was going to go straight from his office to a Lions Club meeting and would then be going out to a movie. The movie was scheduled to conclude at around 11 p.m., and Dr. Rand asked his wife to pick him up on Main Street, about 1 block away. Ray Bailey worked at the Beckley hardware store throughout the day. At around 5:30 p.m., he had dinner with his wife and daughter. His wife later recalled that he was in an upbeat mood, apparently over a new radio which he planned to purchase for the family. Shortly after dinner, he showered, shaved, and left the home at some point between 6:30 and 7 p.m. He told his wife that he was going back to the hardware store to finish up some work. Though she did not know it at the time, it would be the last time Irene Bailey would see her husband alive. Bailey was next seen at a service station at the corner of Johnstown Road and Kanawha Street. Station attendant James Fleshman recalled seeing Bailey and his 1941 Buick there at approximately 7:30 p.m. Bailey paid for his gas with a $10 bill and was given change in return. Meanwhile, Nellie Rand had herself returned home, where she too had dinner with her daughters and her sister Helen. After dinner, she donned a blue silk dress and several pieces of jewelry. The bridal shower on Ann Street was scheduled to begin at 8 p.m. By now, the evening air had chilled, and Nellie donned a gray coat over top of her dress. She left the home in the family's 1946 Chrysler at approximately 7:30 p.m. A short time later, a group of boys and a neighborhood resident heard what they thought were gunshots in the vicinity of the Black Knight Country Club. Beulah Callahan of 2301 South Kanawha Street reported having heard the shots at 10 minutes past 8, though she could not be certain from which direction they came. Upon hearing the shots, the group of boys hurried in their direction, but by the time they arrived, they saw only one car, a light blue Chrysler Commodore parked along the side of the road. Kenneth Rand attended the Lions Club meeting in Beckley from 6 until 8 p.m. His presence at the meeting was confirmed by many other attendees. After the meeting, Rand said he returned briefly to his office, then mailed a letter, and proceeded then to the Lyric Theater, where the Hal Wallace film Desert Fury was playing. Curiously, the ticket taker, Beckley Mayor W.A. Burke, later said he couldn't recall having sold Rand a ticket that night, but added that Rand was a regular patron on Tuesday nights. When the film ended at around 11 p.m., Dr. Rand walked to Main Street, where Nellie was supposed to pick him up. When she had not shown by 11:30, Dr. Rand accepted a ride home from a neighbor, Mrs. Lorenzo Torrione. Torrione later reported nothing out of the ordinary about Rand's demeanor. Dr. Rand arrived back at his home to find only his daughters and sister-in-law Helen there. Helen advised that she had not seen or heard from Nellie since she left the house at around 7:30. Dr. Rand grew more and more nervous. At around 12:30 a.m., he began calling around to Nellie's friends. He contacted the home of Martha Dickinson, where the bridal shower was to have taken place. Dickinson advised that Nellie had never arrived. Dr. Rand's unease increased. A feeling in the pit of his stomach led him to fear that Nellie may have again gone off the marital rails. His fears were confirmed the following morning when he telephoned the Beckley hardware store and was advised that Ray Bailey had not shown up for work. Dr. Rand wasted no time. He contacted the police and reported both his car and his wife as missing. Ray Bailey's brother, Earl, did likewise. At about the same time, West Virginia State Trooper R.L. Tabscott was driving south on Old U.S. Route 1921 en route to Cool Ridge. He spotted a vehicle parked along the north side of the road near the old Raleigh ballpark. Upon his return, approximately 2 hours later, he found the car still parked where he had first observed it. Tabscott stopped and inspected the seemingly abandoned car. He noted a large amount of blood and 2 coats in the back seat. The key was still in the ignition. Tabscott secured the car and headed back to headquarters to report his findings. Almost simultaneous to his arrival, 2 other persons, O.G. Goodson and his son Raymond, arrived at the State Police Detachment with a chilling tale. The pair had come upon 2 dead bodies just off the old Penman Road, about 2 miles away. Along with Goodson's son and Colonel H.C. Fulmer, Trooper Tabscott drove out to the remote location. Raleigh County Coroner Douglas Bryant was contacted and instructed to meet them there. The scene that met them along the old Penman Road was gruesome. Roughly 20 feet down an embankment lay the bodies of Ray Bailey and Nellie Rand. Nellie's identity would not be established until later. However, a card in Bailey's suit pocket would quickly connect the double homicide with the abandoned Buick discovered earlier. The scene was not void of clues. Nellie Rand was found lying face down, her head upon Bailey's legs. Bailey was also found lying face down. Both were covered in a large amount of blood. Disturbances in the surrounding earth and grass indicated that the bodies had either been rolled or carried down the embankment from the Penman Road. Along the edge of the embankment, authorities found Nellie Rand's shoes and lower undergarments, apparently separated from her body before it was taken down the hill. Both Bailey and Rand were dressed in formal attire that seemed wholly out of place in the rural surroundings. A small amount of money was found in Bailey's pockets, and an expensive rhinestone necklace hung around Nellie Rand's throat. At first glance, robbery did not appear to have been a motive, at least not yet. It quickly became apparent that Bailey and Rand had been killed elsewhere and their bodies dumped along the seldom-used roadway. Tire tracks along the Penman Road indicated that a vehicle had stopped at the embankment, proceeded on for another 30 feet, turned around, and then left the area the same way it had entered. The road itself led to the now-defunct Penman Mine, an entity that had ceased operation roughly 6 years previous. It was not a commonly traveled route. A connection between the bizarre double homicide and Ray Bailey's abandoned vehicle seemed inescapable. Bailey's car, a dark green 1941 Buick Roadmaster, was removed from the highway and towed to police headquarters. Plaster casts were made of footprints found nearby. However, heavy rain earlier that morning had rendered the impressions virtually useless. Authorities traced the faint prints through some brush and along the northern edge of the disused ballpark. The prints led them up to a paved road which circled the field and then ended. Once the scene along the Penman Road was documented and secured, the bodies of Ray Bailey and Nellie Rand were removed and taken to the Rose Mortuary in Beckley for autopsies. Ray Bailey's vehicle yielded several interesting clues, all of which painted a morbid picture of what had transpired. Ray Bailey's gabardine topcoat was found in the back seat, along with Nellie Rand's gray coat with a fur collar. A man's hat and Nellie's purse were found on the shelf above and behind the rear seats. The entire back seat area was covered in partially dried blood, the majority of which had pooled on the floor of the passenger side. The rear seats were found to have been pierced by 3 bullets. An examination of the trunk turned up 3 spent .38 caliber lead slugs. The conclusion was obvious. The couple had been shot to death while in the back seat, and their bodies then transported nearly 9 miles away to the Penman Road. At around 4 p.m., an officer with the Beckley Police Department radioed in to report that Nellie Rand's 1946 Chrysler Commodore had been located on an access road about 100 yards below the Black Knight Country Club. It didn't take authorities long to realize that they had just found their true crime scene. Her car was parked off the side of a narrow slate road which led from the country club to Route 3. Roughly 20 feet behind the car, police found a small patch of blood on the ground. Not far from this, they came upon something they did not expect to find: Nellie Rand's wristwatch, broken, its hands frozen at 8:15. Had Nellie Rand somehow managed to make a desperate attempt at flight, or had the timepiece been ripped from her wrist by the killer? Save for a small amount of blood on the rear fender, the Rand vehicle was otherwise clean and soon released back to Dr. Rand. Dr. Rand's Chrysler and Ray Bailey's Buick were found within 1/2 mile of one another, while the bodies of Nellie and Ray were found over 9 miles away on a seldom-used stretch of road. Just what had transpired? Had the killer actually shot Rand and Bailey on the roadway near the country club, driven 9 miles to a remote area to dispose of their bodies, and then driven the Bailey vehicle back to a location barely 1/2 mile from the scene of the murder? The Black Knight Country Club was, and still is, located here. On November 4th, 1947, the vehicles of Ray Bailey and Nellie Rand were parked about here, along what was then only a slightly improved section of roadway. Based upon the patch of blood which was found, Ray Bailey's Buick was parked behind Nellie Rand's Chrysler. Taking into account the recollections of the 4 young boys and the resident on South Kanawha Street and the time on Nellie Rand's shattered watch, authorities feel confident that the shooting occurred at approximately 8:15 p.m. The 4 boys who reported hearing the shots stated that they quickly hurried in their direction. When they came upon the scene, however, they saw only the blue Chrysler belonging to Nellie Rand. This would seem to indicate that the killer did not dawdle and drove away from the scene within a minute of firing the fatal shots. The following day, the bodies of Nellie Rand and Ray Bailey were found approximately here, along an old roadway leading to the old Penman mine. According to an article from 1940, the Penman mine was located approximately 5 miles from Beckley as the crow flies, but 10 miles by road. The mine itself had ceased operation around 1942. That night, a pair of hunters who were in the area of the Penman Road reported having heard a vehicle enter and then leave the area at approximately 11 p.m. As they were hunting out of season, the pair had been reluctant to come forward initially. They stated they had feared the vehicle may have been the game warden, and therefore did not actually see it as they were attempting to keep out of sight. If the estimated time of the shooting is accurate, and the accounts of the hunters near the Penman Road are to be believed, why did it take 2 hours and 45 minutes for the killer to drive from here to here? And again, why would the killer have then turned around and driven Bailey's car back to within a half a mile of where the shooting had taken place? Why the 18-mile round trip? And what could the motive have been for such an elaborate undertaking? Given the presence of Nellie's rhinestone necklace and the money in Ray Bailey's pockets, authorities initially ruled out robbery as a possible motive. This theory, however, would soon be turned on its head when Dr. Rand advised that 3 rings valued at approximately $2,000 were missing. Ray Bailey's wife, Irene, added that he had at least $400 on his person when he left their home. And curiously, the separately wrapped presents purchased by Nellie Rand the previous day were also missing. Dr. Rand described the missing rings as follows. 1. A diamond ring, the stone being just over 1 carat and set in yellow gold. 2. A diamond engagement ring, the stone being a little under 1 carat, also set in yellow gold. 3. A yellow gold wedding band with 4 or 5 small diamonds. The missing presents were said to have been identically wrapped and containing what have only been described as matching pieces of chinaware, identical or similar to a type owned by Mrs. Irma Lowe. None of these items, nor any of the $400 in cash, has ever been found. Given the scandalous nature of the relationship between the 2 victims, authorities naturally took a hard look at their spouses. Irene Bailey was unable to drive, and her daughters were able to vouch for her presence at their home at 106 Johnstown Road during the entirety of the evening. Dr. Rand's movements on the evening of November 4th were slightly less concrete. He was last seen leaving the Lions Club meeting at just after 8 p.m. The film at the Lyric Theater he was planning to see started at around 9 p.m. and ended at around 11 p.m. He was picked up by his neighbor on Main Street at approximately 11:30 p.m. Despite the lack of any solid, corroborating witnesses to Dr. Rand's actions between 8 and 11:30, authorities felt that his subsequent behavior and demeanor, not to mention the time and distance that would have been involved in carrying out the murders and disposal of the bodies, made him a less than likely suspect. The court of public opinion, however, would not be so charitable. For years thereafter, a dark cloud of suspicion would hang over Dr. Rand. 2 days after the brutal killings, authorities got what they thought was the first break in the case. A local pawnbroker named Steve Pachuta contacted the state police and advised that a black male had attempted to pawn a ring which seemed to fit the description of one of those worn by Nellie Rand. Pachuta would later identify the man as 33-year-old Vernon Mitchell. If it was Mitchell who attempted to pawn a ring at Pachuta's store, then his timing could not have been worse. It turned out that Mitchell had applied for a job as a chef at the Black Knight Country Club at approximately 5 p.m. on the same day as the murders. Mitchell was hired and reported to work the following morning. Mitchell was taken into custody at the country club and then, on Saturday, November 8th, was driven to Morgantown, West Virginia, where a lie detector test was administered. For reasons that remain unknown, he was then taken back to Beckley and jailed under the name John Doe. Mitchell's wife learned of his return and retained noted attorney James Rowland. Rowland immediately filed a writ of habeas corpus and did not mince words with regards to his client's detention.
His detention is one of the most damnable things that could have happened in the community. The arrest of a Negro with no more evidence than they have. This man is a property owner and the father of several children and the husband of a school teacher, all of whom are held in high respect in the community.
Rowland reportedly capped this by stating that if he were forced to bring the matter to trial, he would subpoena many of Beckley's most prominent citizens and ask them under oath if they had ever had an illicit relationship with Nellie Rand. Mitchell was soon released. As it turned out, authorities would not have to wait long before their sagging hopes were again artificially lifted. On Sunday, November 23rd, the state police received an almost incredible message from Cincinnati, Ohio. A 21-year-old man, a former resident of Crab Orchard, West Virginia, had confessed to the murders of Nellie Rand and Ray Bailey. James Richardson, arrested in Cincinnati on a reckless driving charge following an accident, even signed a detailed statement wherein he described his actions and motives. Dubious, but determined to follow up on every lead, representatives of the West Virginia State Police traveled to Cincinnati and brought Richardson back to Beckley for interrogation. However, any hopes for a quick resolution to the double tragedy evaporated as holes quickly appeared in Richardson's confession. Most glaringly, he stated that he had killed Rand and Bailey with a .32 caliber pistol, when ballistics had proved beyond a doubt that the bullets used in the slaying were .38 caliber. Later, when taken to the places where the bodies and vehicles were located, Richardson was unable to pinpoint their exact location. Richardson himself would later comment that there did seem to be a lot of holes in his confession. Richardson later recanted and attributed his confession to a fungus infection in his eardrums, an affliction that had ailed him since the war and which often caused his mind to go blank. He also admitted to being a devotee of detective and mystery magazines. Convinced that Richardson was little more than a fantasist, he was instead charged and convicted for having stole the vehicle he was driving in Cincinnati. Finally, in April of 1949, what would prove to be the final act in the original Rand-Bailey murder investigation played out. On April 29th of that year, 20-year-old Charles Brown was captured by police in Cleveland, Ohio, after attempting to hold up a taxi driver. Once in custody, Brown told the Cleveland authorities that he wanted to get, quote, something big off his mind. Brown, also a former resident of Beckley, then claimed that he was the one who had shot and killed Nellie Rand and Ray Bailey a year and a half earlier. Although authorities in both Beckley and Cleveland were skeptical, Sergeant Ezra Zirkle and Trooper Walter Hampton traveled to Cleveland to check the validity of Brown's story. Brown claimed that on the night of the murder he had taken a walk to alleviate a headache. He happened upon Bailey and Rand parked near the country club and attempted a robbery on the spur of the moment. According to Brown, he only fired because Bailey attempted to jump him and Mrs. Rand began to scream. Brown claimed he then pawned the .38 caliber pistol in Bluefield. However, it quickly developed that Charles Brown had the best of all possible alibis for the night of the shooting. As it turned out, he was incarcerated in the Raleigh County Jail on a larceny charge from October 14th of 1947 until November 14th. Brown's parents later opined that he had simply confessed to the killings in the hopes that he would escape the charges brought against him in Ohio. From there, the investigation into the double killings hit a seemingly impenetrable brick wall. With no new information, the public ire and suspicion gradually subsided. Dr. Rand persevered, and eventually the stigma surrounding him also faded away. He later remarried and continued with his dental practice until his retirement in 1967. Dr. Kenneth Rand remained in Beckley, residing in the same Harper Road residence for the remainder of his life. He never again spoke publicly about the murders. Dr. Kenneth Rand died on November 8, 2005, at the age of 101. In 1997, Reverend Robert Tabscott, the son of the West Virginia state trooper who happened upon Ray Bailey's blood-spattered Buick, spoke out on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the tragedy. Tabscott stated that he was in the process of writing an in-depth account of the case, utilizing the original police report retained by his father. Both Tabscott and former Raleigh County Sheriff Okie Mills openly declared that they knew, or thought they knew, the identity of the killer. According to Mills, the murderer himself died or was killed within 2 years of the murders, and his identity was revealed to him by a tipster. Mills would only state that the killer was, quote, one of the last men seeing Nellie Rand, end quote, and that it was not Dr. Rand. In 2009, Reverend Tabscott elaborated further, stating that his research pointed to Ray Bailey being the primary target of the killer, and that the motive was in some way related to a local numbers racket. Bailey had, according to Tabscott, been skimming money off the top. He further alleged that members of the West Virginia State Police were complicit. However, if Robert Tabscott had truly uncovered the identity of the killer, he never got the chance to reveal what he knew. Reverend Tabscott died on May 12, 2017, at the age of 79. His book was never published. Today, what has become known as the country club murders has yet to entirely fade from memory. As recently as April of 2021, the murders of Nellie Rand and Ray Bailey were included in Dining with the Departed, a paranormal-themed fundraiser held at the old Black Knight Country Club. The Black Knight Club itself is now an entirely public entity and has been appropriately rechristened the historic Black Knight Municipal Park. Dr. Rand's Main Street offices, the Lyric Theater, and the Beckley Hardware and Supply Company have all since been demolished. 74 years have now passed since the cold, rainy night when Nellie Rand and Ray Bailey were brutally murdered, and the case today remains just as it was in November of 1947, unsolved and cold.
Given the amount of time which has passed, it does seem increasingly unlikely that there will ever be a true resolution to this case. Most of the people involved have long since passed away, and with each passing year, first-hand memories of the tragedy grow fainter and fainter. And yet there is always that faintest of hopes, that one small sliver of a chance that some long-lost piece of evidence or information may surface. Perhaps someone during the last 74 years unburdened their conscience to a child or grandchild. Perhaps the killer, out of either guilt or ego, kept a diary of his or her activities. Or maybe the killer is, at this very moment, still very much alive and slowly creeping up on the title of centenarian. After all, Dr. Rand lived to see his 100th year. Perhaps, just perhaps, the answers are still within reach.
Elmer Ray Bailey and Nellie Rand are thought to have been shot and killed at approximately 8:15 p.m. on November 4th, 1947. They were shot in the back seat of Ray Bailey's 1941 Buick Roadmaster. The vehicle is believed to have been parked approximately 100 yards below the clubhouse of the Black Knight Country Club. 3 .38 caliber slugs were found in the trunk of Bailey's vehicle. Dr. Rand's vehicle, a 1946 or 47 Chrysler Commodore, was found still parked at the scene of the shooting. 2 pieces of what is only described as chinaware, which had been wrapped as presents, were missing from the Rand vehicle. The china had been purchased because it either matched or complemented chinaware owned by Irma Rowe. Nellie was supposed to have attended a bridal shower for Rowe that evening, but never arrived. A gabardine topcoat and a gray coat with a fur collar were found in the back seat of the Bailey vehicle. Nellie's purse and a man's hat were found on the shelf above the back seat. A drying puddle of blood was found beneath the area where it is believed the Bailey vehicle was parked. Nellie Rand's wristwatch, broken and its hand stopped at 8:15, was found nearby. The bodies of Ray Bailey and Nellie Rand were found the following morning approximately 9 miles away along what is still known as the Penman Road, a slightly improved roadway which led to the abandoned Penman mine. Both Nellie and Ray had each been shot once in the head. Their bodies were found approximately 20 feet over an embankment from the roadway. Nellie was attired in a blue nightdress, and a rhinestone necklace was found around her neck. 3 diamond rings, valued at approximately $2,000 in 1947, were missing from Nellie's hands. Ray Bailey's wife advised that she was under the impression Ray had been carrying $400 in cash, intending to purchase a new radio. Authorities at the time believed that the killings were either a crime of jealousy or a hold-up at gunpoint gone wrong.